let's go straight into Brexit then, as opposed to skirting around it. That your stamp on the whole process, the Brady Amendment. Now, for those of you who are listening who are lucky enough to have forgotten about all this, the Brady Amendment was that amendment to Theresa May's deal in January 2019, which essentially said, we'll vote for this if you remove the Irish backstop. So it added a lot of clarity in a very confused time, focused the spotlight on the backstop rather than, sort of a plethora of other issues that were being raised. I wonder briefly, how did that come about? You mentioned just there that you had a meeting with Theresa May very early on and said this isn't going to fly. Was that at the time? Was that in your mind to go, actually, a wee amendment would focus some of this, be a lightning rod for this criticism and focus it? How did that Brady Amendment come about? Because it was a critical moment in that sort of months of Brexit psychodrama.
Well, what I wanted when I went to see her privately to say this won't get through Parliament was for her to accept that it wasn't going to get through Parliament and to try to change it, because I just didn't think there was any point in putting the thing to the House of Commons in that form. So we then were told that it was going to be put before the Commons. Then it was deferred until after Christmas. There was an attempt to get some clarification, but that didn't really go anywhere. So by the time the House of Commons came back from Christmas, it was clear there was a need to try to find a way of breaking the logjam. And there'd been a number of us. Andrew Morrison, who was then the chairman of the Northern Ireland Select Committee, had also been involved in trying to find ways forward on this. But I put forward the amendment, and it was, I think, a crucial point that there had been some consideration that we could try to amend it, saying that you need the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration. But that clearly wasn't a runner, because the political declaration, whilst not technically binding in a statutory way, was a clear indication of what the end point was meant to be.
Looking back now, do you have any, is regrets the right word? I don't know, in blocking that Irish backstop? Northern Ireland is now divided from the rest of the UK by what is essentially an Irish sea border. An Irish sea border proposed, incidentally, by the leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party that you supported, Boris Johnson. Was casting aside the Irish backstop a rash decision?
I simply don't think there was any way in which the agreement with the backstop was going to succeed, and of course that proved to be the case in that Parliament. And I certainly, I think there were two very significant problems with the agreement that Theresa May brought back. One was that Northern Ireland would be treated differently, and I think we have obviously got a degree of that under the current circumstances. The other was the capacity for the whole of the United Kingdom to be required to remain in the customs union against its wishes, because the agreement said that the United Kingdom would only be able to leave the customs union if the EU agreed to that happening. So it was an odd agreement to have reached, and it certainly wasn't going to go through in the 17 to 19 Parliament. A fascinating essay question for somebody as to whether it would have got through in the 2019 Parliament.
There's a related question here from Umar. Given your responsibility for the Brady Amendment, which led to the end of the original backstop, what reforms and what are your thoughts on the current Northern Ireland Protocol, which has been heavily criticised by unionists in Northern Ireland? From Umar.
Well, I mean, I think an awful lot of this ought to be achievable through good faith. And, I hope that the difficulties we had a couple of weeks ago at the Irish border with the Commission seeking to close the border for the purposes of vaccines, I hope that there might end up being some positive result arising from that, in that I think the affront to the United Kingdom government was probably only surpassed by the level of affront to the government of the Republic, in that the Commission hadn't consulted with either. So, I think the determination of both governments to make sure that we operate the arrangements relating to the Irish border and indeed to the GB Northern Ireland passage of goods ought to be something which is dealt with bilaterally with good faith. And, one might say the common travel area and the common employment area, which existed for so many decades without any legislative underpinning, show that a little bit of common sense relating to the Irish border can work.
It strikes me, though, I mean, what you're saying right now, I imagine would be cold comfort to the likes of the DUP, who are, coming out swinging, saying we need to abolish the Northern Ireland Protocol. Would it be fair to say that you are more on board with where Michael Gove and his EU counterpart are, which is to say that you'd like to reform it and make small ameliorations and small changes to fix the situation, rather than what the DUP, for example, and the UUP are suggesting, which is axe it all together?
I think if it's operated sensibly, that would be more than a small amelioration. I think with sensible operation, recognising that the biggest flows of goods are with trusted traders that are well known and move things on a daily basis, you can take out huge amounts of goods that are moved and recognise that there's really no need to be concerned about them, whether they're crossing the border or crossing the Irish Sea. And moving to some sensible intelligence-led checks using technology properly. I think Bertie Ahern said something on that subject not long after the referendum, when he said 90% of it can be dealt with by technology, and the other 10% will just turn a blind eye to. Well, that might have been a sort of florid way of putting it.
Mm-hmm. It sort of strikes me, though, and I want to move on to COVID in just one moment, though. I mean, there are two problems here as raised by the Unionists in Northern Ireland. One is what we've just been talking about, which is the technical problems. So that's where technology and good faith and small ameliorations come in. And the other one that a lot of Unionists have concerns about and are looking to Boris Johnson and I suppose other Tory MPs like yourself to get on board is this constitutional problem, which is how can you and other Tory, Conservative and Unionist MPs look yourself in the mirror, knowing that a part of the United Kingdom is being treated very differently from the rest of the United Kingdom. Do you have much truck with that argument?
Well, I guess the Anglo-Irish Agreement treated Northern Ireland differently from the rest of the United Kingdom. The oddity, I suppose, about this is that one of the Unionist perfectly reasonable concerns is the extent to which the protocol acts against the Anglo-Irish Agreement in itself. So I think there are clearly significant difficulties which need to be resolved. I guess the answer is that moving from an arrangement for the United Kingdom that had been in place for 45 years, 47 or 8 years by the time we actually left, was always going to be difficult and going to have some sort of jagged edges. And those are things that need to be resolved.
Okay. A final question on this from Olivia. Speaking honestly, how much did you think about Northern Ireland when you campaigned for Brexit in 2016?
Well, I mean, I've said many times, I was Shadow Europe Minister from 2004 to 7. My view then was that we should seek the return of competencies from Brussels. I think overall it would have been preferable to bring back competencies on a more gradual basis if it was possible to do so, rather than having a referendum. Once we ended up with a referendum, with a sort of straightforward binary choice, do you wish to be an independent, self-governing democracy or not? There was only one answer that I could supply to that question. So, I think the difficulty. I took it as a very likely the last occasion on which the British people would have the opportunity to decide an existential question.
That sounds a bit like a no, to be honest, does it not?
Fully aware and always very fond of Northern Ireland as well. If I say it, I hope in a non-patronising way, not least because I spent half my teenage years with my best friend was from Northern Ireland, and I spent half my time with his family. So always aware of and always very sympathetic to. But the question before us was one that, in my view, could only have one answer.